Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about the Appalachian Mountains. This is the dark side of Appalachia. Even the locals are too scared to talk about. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. I'd also love to hear where you're listening from. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. Now let's start. The cabin was cheap, like suspiciously cheap. It sat at the edge of nowhere, in a forest hollow about an hour outside Asheville. Some friend of a friend arrangement, one of those, hey, if you don't mind the bugs and no cell service, you can crash there for a bit kind of deals. At the time, I was broke, burnt out, and just looking to disappear for a while. So when someone mentioned an empty cabin tucked into the hills, I grabbed my duffel and left the city that same week. It wasn't much to look at. Single story, slanted roof, a wraparound porch that had mostly given up on being level. But it had a working stove, a semi-functional bathroom, and 4 solid walls. That was all I needed. Plus, it was surrounded by nothing but pine and poplar. No cars, no neighbors, no sounds except for squirrels fighting in the branches, and the occasional low drone of wind passing through the trees. Well, there was one neighbor about a quarter-mile up the ridge. There was an old trailer tucked behind a thicket. First time I saw it, I assumed it was abandoned. The windows were fogged with grime and there was moss creeping up the siding. But 3 days after I settled in, a man came walking down through the brush. No trail, no warning. Just stepped out of the trees like he had been waiting for the right moment. He was holding a machete in one hand and a plastic grocery bag sagging with cans in the other. He introduced himself as Ellis, said he'd lived on that ridge his whole life. Didn't offer a handshake or a smile, just a flat voice and eyes that didn't blink as often as they should have. I wouldn't say we became friends, but we weren't strangers either. He helped me clear a tree that had fallen across the gravel road after a storm. Didn't say much while we worked, just nodded whenever I asked a question and used the machete like it was part of him. After that, I'd see him around sometimes. Always alone, always moving, like he had somewhere to be, even if there was nowhere to go. He talked about the woods like other people talk about their childhood homes. Knew every spring, every outcrop, every dip in the trail. He'd say things like, the veins run clearer after a hard rain, or watch for the teeth near the bluff. I assumed he meant the stream beds and the cliffs, but he never really explained anything. Once, I spotted these weird little stacks of stones near the creek. They were low, almost symmetrical, like someone had put thought into their arrangement. I asked him what they were. He just said, memory stacks. And that was it, no follow-up, just turned and kept walking. Then he disappeared. It wasn't dramatic. No cries for help or broken windows or blood on the porch. He just stopped showing up. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he'd gone into town, maybe he'd holed up in the trailer for a while. But after 5 days, I noticed the quiet in a different way. No boot prints near the spring. No soft scrape of his shovel up the ridge. No cigarette smoke hanging in the trees like before. I hiked past his trailer one afternoon and stood there for a long time, listening. Nothing moved. No rustle of plastic, no clink of tools, no voice humming low and tuneless like he used to. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. That night, just after midnight, I heard footsteps. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The sound was soft, gravel shifting slowly like someone circling the cabin. My eyes snapped open, heart already racing. I sat up and waited. The footsteps came again, crunching lightly around the side of the house. I eased off the bed and crept to the front window. No lights, no headlights, no car. Just the thick black of the woods pressing in on all sides. Then, 3 short knocks. At the back door. Now that door doesn't lead to anything. It opens onto steep brush and a downhill slope so dense I'd nearly eaten dirt trying to clear a path the week before. No one should have been standing there. Not unless they'd pushed through that thicket in the dark. I didn't turn on any lights, just moved quietly toward the back, bare feet barely touching the floorboards. Another knock. Then nothing. I opened the door a few inches. Ellis was there. He was way too close, face nearly brushing the screen like he'd been leaning in. His skin looked stretched, like he hadn't eaten in days. Pale. Tense. And his eyes, too wide. Like he was trying to keep them from closing. He smiled when I opened the door, but not like someone recognizing you. It was mechanical. Like he remembered he was supposed to smile and didn't know why. "Drop something," he said, "up by the spring. Got a flashlight?" I froze. My hand on the door frame, flashlight still on the table behind me. I hadn't seen him in days, and now he was here, asking me to walk with him into the woods. After midnight? But he looked so wrong. Not just physically. There was something off in his voice, like someone reciting a line from memory. Still, I grabbed the flashlight. Some part of me didn't want to leave him out there, not looking like that. We walked in silence, up the trail, deeper into the dark. No wind, no insects, no sound except for our footsteps. I kept waiting for him to explain what he'd lost or start looking around. But he just walked, straight ahead, eyes fixed forward. We passed the spring. He didn't stop. "You said you dropped something." "I said might have dropped it farther in," he mumbled. Took a walk, but he wasn't scanning the ground, wasn't sweeping the light or pausing to check. He didn't seem like someone looking for anything. He seemed like someone heading somewhere, very specific. And not for the first time. I stopped walking. "Ellis," I said, "this doesn't feel right." He turned, just stood there, staring. The flashlight caught his face. His pupils didn't shrink. He didn't blink. His breath came slow and deep, like he was trying to control it. I held the flashlight out. "Take this. I'm heading back." He didn't move. The smile vanished. Jaw muscles twitched, like he was chewing on something he didn't want to swallow. Still staring. I didn't wait, just turned and walked. Every step felt like it echoed in my bones. I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to hear him running too. I just moved fast. Eyes locked on the trail, flashlight beam jittering ahead of me. When I reached the cabin, I turned once, just to check. He wasn't there. I slammed the door shut, bolted the lock, drew the curtains. Then I sat down in the middle of the living room with my back against the wall and the flashlight in my hand. I didn't sleep. Not even when the sky went light and the birds finally started making noise again. The next morning, I hiked up to his trailer. Slowly. Every stick crack made me jump. The grass had gone tall and wild. The fire pit was buried in ash. The steps to the door were blanketed with dry leaves. No footprints, no signs of life. He hadn't been there for days. That night, I stayed up again, sat in the dark, listening. I don't think I even blinked for the first hour. But nothing came. No gravel crunching, no knock. I waited until sunrise, packed everything I could fit into my car, and left the rest behind. Didn't tell anyone. I just got in the car and drove. I hike with paper maps, a military-grade compass, and dogs I trust more than most people. There are parts of the Appalachians that seem allergic to being found. Over the years, I've gotten good at listening when those places start making that known. This was late April, early enough that patches of snow lingered off trail. I took my niece and nephew for a long weekend, 3 days, 2 nights, west of Standing Indian Mountain, right near the Tennessee border, a spot I'd scoped a few years earlier. It wasn't glamorous, just a quiet basin carved between 2 ridges, tucked so tight you couldn't spot it from either ridge sightline. No official campsites, no fire rings, nothing left behind from past visitors. That was exactly why I chose it, for its absence of disturbance. We carried what we needed. One modest 2-person tent for the kids, another for me, a bear canister stuffed with all our meals, and Rook, my Belgian Malinois. He's built like a tank and smart as hell. He doesn't bark unless he has a reason, and he doesn't scare easy. I remember my niece, she was 13, insisting on pitching her own tent. I liked that. She set up maybe 3 feet from mine, Rook curled up right at her doorway, tail to nose, ears angled toward the ridge that loomed behind us, his stance low but alert. That first night, I couldn't sleep. That weird halfway place where your brain can't decide between sleep and alert. Around midnight, I heard its steps. 1, 2. Then a long pause. Then another. They came from the ridge behind us, where the tree line was thick and the slope so steep you'd need both hands to climb. It wasn't a deer, too deliberate. Not a raccoon, too heavy. I froze under my sleeping bag. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just listened. My 40 was right there beside me, round-chambered, safety on. I didn't reach for it, I just listened. Rook didn't growl, but I saw him shift. His silhouette rose. He was alert too. We stayed like that for minutes, or maybe it was longer. Then the steps stopped. No shout, no cough, no flashlight, just silence. The kind of silence that vibrates because you're suddenly aware of every distant creak snap. By dawn, the kids were still asleep. I slipped out, zipped up my jacket against the chill. Rook was already pacing the girls' tent, nose low to the ground, his body tense. But the circle he traced was too scholarly. No prints, no snapped twigs, no sign of anything crossing that line. We had no answers. After a simple breakfast, I cooked oatmeal, the kids doled out raisins. We took a short hike about a quarter mile up a narrow draw. The terrain went from broad to choked with trees and brush. I wanted them to stretch their legs. I wanted to feel like this was still a regular camping trip. Then Rook stopped. His body froze, tail rigid, his ears pointed forward. Without warning, he took off downhill. Fast, open stride, no hesitation. I dropped my pack, sprinted after him. I didn't expect what I found. It was a wreck. A tent, shredded and flattened into the dirt, like gravity finally won. Tarps torn and hanging from low branches like tattered flags. A cooler crushed inward, as though a vehicle had run over it. One boot, lonesome, off in the muck. A camping chair snapped apart. A thermos with cracked plastic, half buried. Nothing smelled old. No mold, no leaves in the cooler, no animal gnaw. That gear wasn't ancient. Whatever happened recently and violently. Rook stood in the middle, alert, scanning, waiting. I called out, "Hello? You okay?" Silence. Utter silence. The woods didn't just feel empty, they felt watched. Charged. I didn't let the kids come down. We backtracked the long way, no shortcuts, no lingering. We hiked straight back to base. Nobody spoke. Rook never left my side. Later that evening, as darkness pressed in, my nephew walked behind a thicket to, I was scraping chili from the pot, heard Rook snap upright. He bolted into the woods. My stomach dropped. Instinct kicked in. I dropped everything and chased after him. I found my nephew first, stumbling back, his face pale, eyes wide. "Uncle Cal," he said, "there's something out there." I didn't see it, didn't hear it, but I felt it. Rook had gone deeper, past where the woods were thickest. I called him back 3 times. Finally, he trotted over. Fur bristled, mouth agape, quiet, unnervingly quiet. Back at camp, my niece was holding Leia, her golden retriever. Leia usually ambles off to sniff every root and stone. Not tonight. She was frozen, locked in place, staring at the tree line like she was guarding the world. We did another sweep, flashlights, rifles still in hand, nothing. No eyes shining back, no snap of a twig, just that oppressive, watchful silence. That night, I set a perimeter alarm. I had a mental picture of something trying to slip into camp again. I tied twine around trees, threaded through metal washers, with an Altoids tin full of nails dangling as a crude alarm. It crackles like wind chimes if disturbed. While tying the last loop, I saw something above mine. Another rope, old, nearly rotted into the pine bark. Same kind of washers, same kind of knots. Somebody else had been here. Somebody else tried to guard this spot exactly the same way I did. I cut it down and stuffed it in my pocket. Didn't tell the kids. Instead, I loaded my .40, walked to the fire ring, and fired 6 shots into the dirt, somewhat spaced out. Not at anything, not to scare deer or wolves. For the message, we're not easy prey. Night fell, and everything went silent. No crickets, no nightbirds, no wind stirring the canopy, just crushing stillness. I stayed awake that night, watching the rope swing a little in the fading moonlight, listening for something to start again. Nothing did. By dawn, we were moving fast. No breakfast, no coffee. We packed everything, straps cinched, boots laced. We hit gravel by late morning, but I didn't let us stop until the truck was halfway in sight. That's when I finally told them. I said, I found a wrecked camp, matching perimeter rope. A year later, I watched a documentary, Missing 4111, The Hunted. One case popped up. They showed a map with a red circle. Guess where it landed? Right there, in the basin where Rook had frozen. I was 16 when my cousin Lane talked me into spending a week camping in the mountains with his family. They just bought a chunk of land near the Georgia-North Carolina border. Not close to any town, not near a lake or a lookout point, just raw wooded hills with no structures on it, no real trail markers, no driveways or fencing. Lane's dad kept calling it an investment in raw property, but to me it looked like a weird choice. Basically, they bought a piece of nowhere. I remember watching the signal die on the way up, one bar at a time, until the phone was just a fancy brick in my pocket. No Wi-Fi either, obviously. Just steep hills, a patch of dry clearing where we pitched 5 tents, and a fire ring someone must have built decades ago. It was half collapsed and rusted, but it worked. Sort of. We balanced a grill grate on a couple of flat stones and hoped for the best. Everything smelled like hot dogs and smoke for 3 straight days. There were 10 of us up there. Lane's parents, his twin little sisters, a family they were friends with who brought 2 kids under 10, Lane and me. The adults were content to sit in their camping chairs and drink beers like they were relaxing at a backyard barbecue, even though there wasn't a toilet or even a bench in sight. The kids just ran around in some pack animal formation, taking turns screaming and chasing each other and getting grass stains that made their moms sigh and grab wet wipes. I was the oldest by far. That meant I got to be mostly invisible. Old enough to not need supervision, not quite old enough to escape entirely. I mostly walked around the land by myself, poking at trees, climbing slopes, trying to figure out which direction was north. There was something weird about the place, not in its haunted way, just off. The way the hills folded in on themselves, the way a climb would turn into a dip halfway through. I'd think I was going uphill only to find myself somehow lower than I started. And the trees were old, like unnaturally old. Their trunks leaned sideways like gravity had slowly bent them over decades. None of them grew straight. On the second afternoon, Lane and I were killing time near the southern edge of the ridge, down where the trees thinned out a little and the ground dipped into a shallow draw. That's where I saw it. Barely even that, really. Just a narrow, worn strip through the brush, maybe a foot wide, no bigger than a deer trail. But it didn't look like a game trail. It was too clean, too deliberate. The dirt looked shaved down, smooth as if someone or something had moved through it over and over, always in the same pattern, wearing it into the ground. No hoof prints, no trash. The plants grew right up to the edges but didn't creep across it, like they were being kept back. I stood there staring at it, then I called Lane over. He pushed a few branches aside, crouched, and squinted at the dirt. "That's not a deer trail," he said, and then, Like he realized he was too close to it, he stepped back. Quietly. Not in a scared way. More like respectful. Or like whatever made the trail might still be using it. We marked the nearest tree with an X using my pocket knife. Not because we were planning to come back exactly, but because it felt like we should. Just in case. We didn't say much walking back to camp. At night, after dinner, someone pulled out a flashlight and yelled, "Let's play manhunt." And that was it. Instant chaos. Every kid under 12 lost their minds. They scattered in every direction like this was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to them. The rules were basic. Hide, don't get found, don't get tagged. If someone sees you and says your full name, you're out. Last one hiding wins. Lane and I got picked to be the first runners. Maybe because we were older, or maybe they just assumed we'd come up with cooler hiding spots. We got a 5-minute head start. At first I jogged toward the clearing like everyone else, making it look like I was heading to the usual hiding spots, behind logs, under tarps, near the water cooler. Then I slipped off toward the slope, moving fast but quiet, until I saw our X on the tree. I crouched, shoved the brush aside again. The path was still there, still smooth, still just waiting. Without thinking much about it, I dropped to my knees and slid into the narrow opening. It closed around me faster than I expected. Within a few feet, I had to keep my arms pressed tight to my sides and pull myself forward with my elbows. The ground felt firm and dry, not like topsoil, but packed, almost like hardened clay. I remember noticing how clean it felt. No insects, no cobwebs, no roots in my face. The tunnel sloped downward after about 10 feet, changing from a crawl space to something more like a chute. I kept going, half sliding, half scooting. It felt intentional, like it had been made exactly this size on purpose. Eventually, I hit a tighter squeeze where I had to turn my head sideways and press my cheek into the dirt just to fit through. It scraped my skin. I could feel a heartbeat in my jaw. Then, up ahead, I saw something odd, a split in the tunnel. The main path kept going straight, but off to the right was a narrow turnoff. Smaller, almost invisible unless you were right up on it. I don't know why I went that way, I just did. Some part of me felt like I was meant to. That tunnel got tighter, darker, quieter. My ears started picking up the sound of my own breathing loud in my head. The air thinned. The dirt pressed in closer, then it opened up, suddenly, into a small, hollowed-out space. I switched on my flashlight. She was there, a girl, curled up in the corner, naked, knees to chest, arms locked around them. Her body was covered in thin, straight cuts. Some had scabbed, others were still raw. Her hair was tangled, full of leaves. Her skin looked like it had been drained of all color. But her eyes, wide open, staring at the wall like it was the only thing she'd seen in weeks. I couldn't breathe. I literally stopped breathing. My body froze, and then heat down my legs. I hadn't even realized it was happening. My muscles just gave up. I'd pissed myself right there on the ground. And then, behind me, I heard something crawling, a slow, deliberate scrape of elbows dragging across dirt. No hesitation, no confusion, just steady, methodical movement. I turned off the flashlight, sat in the pitch dark, every nerve on fire. Then, metal, something being dragged. Not carried, dragged. It clinked against the ground, caught on a root. Something heavy. I had no idea what. I let out a breath. Just one, a tiny, shaky sound. The crawling stopped, then picked up speed. I shrank back into the corner, trying to melt into the dirt. The sound grew louder, closer. I could hear breathing now, raspy, dry, wrong, just outside the chamber. And then it passed. I heard it crawl right past the side tunnel, like it didn't know it was there, or didn't care. It stopped maybe 10 feet further ahead, dropped something heavy, metal hitting stone. Then a voice, deep, broken, like the person hadn't spoken in weeks. It made this guttural sound. Not words, just noise. Harsh, angry. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and crawled backwards as fast as I could, scraping my elbows, tearing my shirt, bumping my shoulder into the walls. Hit the main tunnel and just kept moving. Dirt got in my mouth. I didn't care. I saw light ahead. The brush still pushed aside. I lunged out into open air, and I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. Branches clawed at my arms. My foot slipped in moss and slammed into a root. I tripped, caught myself, kept going. Behind me, I heard something. Movement, crashing through the brush, faster than I wanted to believe. I didn't look. I just ran until I could see the tents through the trees. Voices, laughter, someone calling for snacks. It was like I'd stepped out of one world and into another that hadn't noticed the difference. I screamed. Everyone froze, turned to look. I must have looked wrecked. Muddy, shaking, soaked, scratched up. Lane's mom ran to me, shouting my name. I tried to explain, tried to talk. Couldn't get the words out at first. I just kept pointing at the woods. When I finally said, "There's a girl and someone else down there," the grown-ups stopped moving, and then they ran. The sheriff showed up at dawn. They combed the lower ridge, found a man crouched near the base of the trail. He had a knife and a black trash bag filled with tools, some homemade, some rusted. One had blood on it, dry, flaking at the edge of the blade. That's all they told us. They roped off the slope with yellow tape and wooden stakes. The land was never used again. Lane's parents tried to sell it, then gave up. Sarah had just finished an intense 8-week wilderness internship in the southern stretch of the Appalachians. I don't know exactly why she decided to sign up, but I think it was because she needed something to get away from everything, to clear her head. And maybe I did too. So when she called me up and said she wanted me to meet her at the end of it, I didn't even think twice. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I rented a small cabin near Linville Falls, tucked on a secluded forest road that didn't even show up on regular GPS maps. The kind of place that felt so far out of the way you'd wonder if it was even meant to be there. The cabin itself was tiny. A sagging bed in one room, a wood stove that looked like it hadn't been used in years, and a welcome mat half covered in moss. Almost like the forest was slowly reclaiming the place. It was rustic, to say the least, but it had a charm. It felt like a place meant for retreat. Sarah arrived on the second day, looking like she just walked out of the woods. Her clothes were stained with sweat and pine sap, and she smelt like pine tar. She looked stronger, leaner than I remembered. It wasn't just physical. There was something about the way she moved, more deliberate and grounded. Like the mountains had left their mark on her, and now she carried it with her. We spent the first day just relaxing. She was worn out, physically and mentally, but we didn't talk much about what she'd been through. The program was intense. I could see that in the way she carried herself, but she didn't talk about it in detail. Maybe it was something she needed to process on her own. We gave ourselves a day to rest, and then the next morning, we were off on a hike. Sarah had picked out a few of the trails she used to frequent during her program. They weren't well-known spots or touristy trails. She took me through old CCC routes, forgotten paths with rusted trail markers, crumbling stone foundations from camps that had been abandoned decades ago, and fire towers that seemed like they were held together by nothing but iron bolts and memory. It felt like we were walking through forgotten history, the kind of places people only go to if they know where they're going. And we were bushwhacking for a good hour before we even reached the first ridge. Around noon, we stumbled onto a hidden clearing Sarah had remembered from her solo rotations. There was a weathered survey stake sticking out of the ground and a half-burned stump that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Sarah called it her thinking spot. She said it was the place where she'd go to clear her mind, just sit and think. I didn't say it, but I couldn't help feeling unsettled when I looked at the place. It wasn't peaceful like some remote little getaway. It was abandoned. as if something had been left behind and whatever was left didn't want to be disturbed. There was a certain heaviness to it. It felt like a place that was waiting for something or someone to come back to it. We spent a little time there, but eventually we turned back to the trailhead. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky and our legs were shot. Sarah checked her phone, barely any signal, just enough to call for a rideshare. The same app she'd used a few times back in Asheville. 2 drivers were nearby. One was 40 minutes out, the other was just a few miles away. She requested the closer one. I didn't bother checking my phone. There was no signal for me. I just sat on a log by the gravel pull-off and took a long drink from my water bottle. 10 minutes passed, and then we heard it. Tires crunching on gravel. A gray pickup truck appeared around the bend, moving slowly, like the driver was in no rush. The truck didn't park where you'd expect it to. Most drivers pull over to the side of the road near the trailhead for easy access. But this truck coasted in at an odd angle and stopped by the tree line. It was caked in dirt, with no visible license plates, and the back window of the cab was smeared with handprints and dust, like it hadn't been cleaned in forever. Sarah looked down at her phone, then up at the truck. She nodded like she recognized it. "This must be him," she said. I didn't say anything, I just watched as she walked over to the truck and opened the rear door. "You the ride?" she asked. The man in the driver's seat didn't say a word, he just gave her a nod. No smile, no greeting. Sarah climbed into the truck and I followed after her, hesitating for just a second. It felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Maybe it was the way the truck had pulled in at such a strange angle, or how the guy didn't say anything, but I brushed it off. I got in and the door clicked shut behind me. The truck rolled forward, still no words. I didn't bother asking where we were going. I was just ready to relax. We were both exhausted from the hike and the long day. The cab smelled like wet rope and motor oil, a strange combination that made the air feel thick and heavy. Sarah glanced at me, but she didn't seem to notice anything unusual. We drove for a few minutes in silence, then Sarah tapped my thigh and held up her phone. Her GPS was showing something weird. The route we were on wasn't even close to the road that led back to the cabin. In fact, we weren't even on the road we had marked as the pickup point. The dot on her map was drifting further west, deep into unmarked woods, way off course. Then her phone buzzed with a new message from the app. "Hi Sarah, I'm here. Are you nearby?" The profile photo was not of the man driving us, and the car listed was a dark green sedan, not a pickup. A cold feeling washed over me. My stomach dropped. We were in the wrong car. Worse, we were in a stranger's truck, alone, in the mountains, with no signal, no license plate, and no idea where he was taking us. I slowly looked up at the rearview mirror. The man's face was blank, expressionless. He hadn't spoken a word since we got in, not even when Sarah asked if he was the driver. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I leaned forward, trying to sound casual. "Hey man, we actually need to get out up here. Change of plans?" Nothing. He didn't blink, didn't nod. He just kept driving, his eyes locked on the road ahead. The truck's engine hummed louder as he pressed harder on the gas. He didn't acknowledge me at all. That's when something inside me snapped. It wasn't fear, it was a cold, clear instinct. This wasn't just a wrong ride. This was something much worse. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my folding knife and flicked it open. It was small, just something I kept with me for emergencies. Never thought I'd need it for anything like this. Leaning forward, I said, voice steady, "You're not our driver. If you don't stop this truck right now, I will put this blade in your neck." For the first time, his eyes flickered, but they didn't show fear. They just went flat, empty. Then he looked at the road again, as if he hadn't heard a word I'd said. The truck jerked sideways, the tires skidding on loose gravel. Then it stopped abruptly, throwing us both forward in our seats. The doors clicked open with a sharp clunk. Without wasting another second, Sarah was already halfway out of the truck. I followed, jumping out onto the side of the road as the truck shot off, tires kicking up rocks and dirt as it sped away. We stood there, panting, a mixture of adrenaline and disbelief flooding through us. We were alone, surrounded by trees, with no one around for miles. I looked over at Sarah, her hands trembling as she tried to get a grip on her phone. I took it from her and opened the app. The real driver had just left the trailhead, assuming we hadn't shown up. I messaged him. He was still nearby. 10 minutes later, a green sedan appeared, exactly like the app had said. The driver, a younger woman in a reflective vest, held up her phone with Sarah's name displayed. We didn't need to explain much. She drove us back to the cabin in silence. Once we were inside, we told her everything. She didn't interrupt, just kept her eyes on the road. Then she said, "You're not the first, a couple others in the last few weeks. They hang around popular trailheads, grab people who look tired. Tourists don't check." I didn't know what to say. When we finally made it back to the cabin, I immediately called the sheriff's office. I gave them all the details, the truck, the road, the fake pickup. The deputy on the line seemed to take it seriously, saying someone would follow up. Oh, never did. That's the part that gets to me. Not that we were targeted, it's that it's probably still happening. The guy didn't panic when I pulled the knife. He didn't flinch or try to run. He just stopped, like he knew it wasn't his only chance. My shift at the fire tower always began before dawn. I'd signed up for the job as part of a wilderness credit program through the university, and my Uncle Ray had put in a good word for me. He worked with forestry services and told me straight up, Tower 12 at Bear Tree Gap is always empty. You'll have the place to yourself. That sounded like a dream. 40 feet above the forest with nothing but tree canopy and sky in every direction? Sign me up. The tower itself was one of those old steel frame lookouts. Squeaky ladder, single-room cabin, windows on all sides, and a trap door you could lock from inside. Kind of a glorified treehouse for adults. You had to climb a vertical ladder to get up there, which was fine unless it rained. The job wasn't glamorous, log cloud formations, keep an eye out for smoke, radio in any weather or wildlife anomalies, lot of staring into the middle distance. No internet, barely any cell signal. Honestly, that's what I liked about it. It gave me space to breathe. No distractions, no noise, just me, some cracked trail maps, and the forest. That particular Wednesday, I showed up right at 5 a.m. I remember because the gravel under my boots was still slick with dew, and my breath came out in faint clouds when I exhaled. I climbed up, unlocked the hatch, and settled in. First thing I always did was jot down the overnight data. Wind, humidity, temperature shifts. Nothing unusual. Everything quiet. By mid-afternoon, I'd already gone through 2 thermoses of coffee. I was flipping through the old laminated trail maps, the kind that still had outdated routes from 10 years ago. I'd gotten into this habit of tracing the dead trails, seeing how time had worn them down. Most had been shut off due to erosion or deadfall, but some of the markers still showed faint outlines. Little ghosts of paths that once connected the towers. Around 4:10, I did a routine sweep with the binoculars. Started with the cleared western zones. That's when I spotted something odd. A man, alone, was walking hard through the thick pines. No trail, no visible gear. He had no pack, no hat, and no jacket, which stood out because the wind had picked up and the temperature had dropped by then. He was cutting straight across the forest, through dense terrain that wasn't safe for casual hikers. I tilted the binoculars, trying to get a better look. Couldn't make out his face. His stride was determined. Too fast for someone bushwhacking. It didn't make sense. I radioed down, "Base, do we have any hikers registered near the western perimeter, north of the decommissioned trails?" No response. Nothing but a faint hiss of static. I tried again after a few minutes. Still silence. The man never appeared again, just vanished into the trees, like he'd walked behind a curtain and never came out the other side. I wrote a note about it in the logbook, time, direction, estimated distance, but didn't think much more of it at the time. Maybe it was a ranger on an unscheduled patrol. maybe a lost camper. People do stupid things in national parks all the time. Then, at 5:20, the radio crackled again, but not with a voice. Knock, knock, two clear, deliberate taps, as if someone had rapped their knuckles right against wood. I froze. It didn't sound like static or interference. It sounded human, familiar, like the sound you'd make if you tapped on the side of a door frame. I clicked the mic. Bass, did you copy that? Repeat. I heard something over the line. Sounded like knocking. Nothing. Then again, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same tone, like a recording. No variation, no background sound, just two slow, deliberate taps. I sat there staring at the radio, suddenly aware of how quiet the cabin was. My ears strained for something else. Wind, birds, anything. But it was just silence. My fingers hovered over the switch, and then I flipped the radio off. At 6:15, I felt something shift. I couldn't explain it at first. Just this vague sense that something was moving near the base of the tower. Not climbing the ladder, pacing. There was this faint vibration under the floorboards. Then a light rattle at the window, like the wind was testing the glass. I leaned forward, slow, careful, and peered down from the side window. Couldn't see much, just shadows between trees and a strange stillness in the clearing. I decided to check. Grabbed my flashlight, opened the trap door, and climbed halfway down the ladder. The metal was cold under my hands. I paused, shined the light around the clearing. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. But right under the ladder was a pile of leaves. I know for a fact that Spot had been clear that morning. I always sweep under the base to check for tracks. But now there was this fresh mound, neat, almost arranged. My heart started to beat faster. I climbed the rest of the way down and stepped carefully around the pile. That's when I saw it. Something peeking out from under the leaves. I brushed them aside with my boot and revealed a rusted metal trail marker. Old style. The kind they stopped using years ago. The paint was flaking, the corners bent. It looked like it had been torn off a tree. Splinters still stuck to the back. I was crouched there, holding it in my hands, when I heard this muffled thunk behind me. Turned around, and there it was, an old cassette recorder. Just sitting there in the dirt like it had been placed. Metal casing, scratched to hell, half covered in pine needles. The red recording light was still glowing. I picked it up, hands sweating, and hit stop. Immediately, silence, but then, in that thick, impossible quiet, knock, knock. Twice. Perfect rhythm, same as the radio. No speaker, just the sound. Like it had emerged straight out of the air. That's when I saw something shift at the edge of the clearing. There was a figure, tall, unmoving, wrapped in a coat that seemed too heavy for the weather. It didn't walk, didn't move. Just stood there with that coat flapping gently even though the trees were still. There was no face I could make out, no sound. It felt like the space between us stretched wrong, like I was looking at it through a warped lens. I didn't think, didn't breathe, just ran. Dropped the recorder right there, sprinted to the ladder, boots slipping over pine needles, legs burning. I climbed like something was behind me, even though nothing chased. Got to the top, slammed the hatch, and locked it with shaking fingers. Sat with my back against the trapdoor, flashlight aimed right at it. Heart thudding, ears straining. I tried, calling out again, nothing. Phone was dead except for ops, only. Tried the base radio, no response. Tried emergency line, just a click, then silence, not even static. Just a dead, hollow nothing. Eventually I must have passed out. I woke up with my head against the wall, flashlight still gripped in my hand. It was light out, no knocks, no sounds. But I waited a while before I opened that hatch. Climbed down slowly, scanning every inch. The pile of leaves was still there, but the recorder? Gone. The marker? Gone too. And in the dirt around the tower base were footprints. Just one tread pattern, deep, circling the tower. Once, twice, 3 times. Then veering off into the woods, I filled out my log with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Drove back down to base, left the key on the hook, and told them flat out, I'm not doing another shift at Tower 12. Not next week, not ever. Nobody argued. The whole drive back down the gravel road and kept looking in the rearview mirror. My cousins Rafe and Jonah drove up from Asheville just to hang out the whole weekend. We didn't plan much, just the usual mix of letting the day take us where it wanted. By Saturday evening, we were all itching for something different. No bars, no town crowds, just mountains, a fire, and whatever came next. Rafe remembered this old logging clearing tucked on the side of the Appalachian Ridge. He called it a bowl in the woods, 40 minutes on foot from the nearest road. There's a cliff on one side, dense timber on the other, and it's the kind of place people don't stumble into by accident. Our plan was simple: hike before dark, build a fire, drink a bottle or two of wine, eat something, laugh, maybe play cards, then hike back before it got too late. We packed light. Rafe grabbed 2 decent bottles of red from his parents' cabinet. I packed sandwiches, ham, cheese, and jerky. Jonah, classic Jonah, brought 2 decks of cards and predictably forgot the batteries for his flashlight. We parked on this narrow gravel ledge clinging to the hillside just as sunset began painting the sky. The trail wasn't a real trail, just a faint indentation Rafe insisted was the one. Almost immediately we had to walk in single file, branches scratching our arms, slope rising sharp on the left. Soon enough, the truck was gone and all we could hear was our own breathing in the forest. The road was swallowed whole. Finally, we broke into the hollow. Rafe wasn't exaggerating. It was wide and widely pristine. A sheer rock face loomed on one side. Trees leaned in on the other like audience members craning for a better view. The forest floor was cushioned in pine needles. You could feel decades of decay in the soft earth. A circle of stones, an old fire ring, sat there like a reminder that someone else, long ago, paused here too. We dropped our packs, scavenged some dry wood, kindling. Within 20 minutes we had the fire going. It flared up, tall flames casting dancing shadows across the clearing. Jonah made some dry wisecrack about witches in the woods. Rafe chucked a stick at his head and we all broke into laughter. We unwrapped our food and popped open wine. For a while, nothing else seemed to matter but that fire and the silence behind it. Then Jonah said the one thing that jolted the moment. "Hey, where's the corkscrew?" Our easy laughs died instantly. We all looked at each other like, "Did you bring it?" No one had. Bags came open and spilled goods everywhere. No corkscrew. A makeshift corkscrew operation began. A key broke off. A stick snapped. Rafe nearly whacked the bottle on a rock. I shoved his arm away. "They're not cheap," I said flatly. I got up. "All right," I said. "I'll go back. It's not far." They both started to argue until I cut them off. "But I want the hatchet, and you swear not to mess with me while I'm gone." I nodded at the hatchet strapped to Jonah's pack. They held up hands. Rafe handed me the flashlight. I grabbed the hatchet, stepped out of the ring of firelight and into the dark woods. Outside that ring, everything changed. The path disappeared into shadow. I kept the beam low, looking for familiar trees or rocks. The air was colder now, heavy with damp moss and the smell of still water. About 10 minutes in, I heard something. Something big scraping through the underbrush to my left. Not a deer, not a small animal. Slow and heavy, twigs cracking, brush parting. I froze and held my breath. Then came the grunt, low, wet, guttural. Not quite human, not quite animal. I thought, hog. These woods have them, and they can get aggressive if surprised. You don't run from wild hogs in uneven dark. So I walked, fast but careful. flashlight sweeping the ground. Every crunch of leaves made me jump. Finally, I saw gravel. The truck. The light at the end of that narrow headlamp felt like salvation. When I walked through my aunt's back door, she peered at me. "You back already?" "Forgot something," I said, breath loud in my chest. "Might have heard a hog out there." She laughed softly. "Then maybe stay." And I said nothing, snatched a corkscrew from the drawer and headed back out. This time taking a different route. A wider, clearer path across an old tobacco field. Easier walking, no surprises. Back at the bowl, the fire was still bright, the flames flickering against the rock wall, but something felt off. A heavy silence in the moments before I stepped into the clearing. Their bags were exactly where we'd left them, our food untouched. But Rafe and Jonah? Gone. I waited, called softly their names, twice, nothing. I sat on a log near the fire, corkscrew in hand, hatchet across my lap. Even the fires seemed hushed now. I told myself they were pranking me. They'd sworn they wouldn't. But still. A minute passed, then 5. Then I heard it. A rustle in front of me, like someone or something stepping through leaves. I snapped on the flashlight. There was someone standing there, barely beyond the trees, tall, arms hanging, hood pulled low, no face visible, completely still. Like a statue. "Rafe?" I asked, voice tight, no movement. The figure just turned, slow and deliberate, and slipped deeper into the forest. My phone buzzed. He answered. "You think this is funny?" Silence. Then Jonah's voice. "We're not there." I scoffed. He continued. "We heard something in the woods, thought it was you. Grabbed the phones and went back to your house. Now we're here. Your aunt's with us." My neck prickled. I clicked off the flashlight. Jonah paused, then said, "Get out. Don't wait. Leave everything." "I'm not hiking out alone," I blurted. "You come to me, now." I ended the call, backed into the rock wall of the bull, sank to a crouch, hatchet clenched in both hands. The forest went silent. Even the fire's crackle felt distant. My heartbeat thumped so loud I could feel it in my ears. I kept replaying that tall shape, its posture, the confidence in how it stood. I lost track of time. 20 minutes? Half an hour? Then 2 beams of light cut through the trees. "Malden?" It was Rafe's voice. I scrambled up and stumbled toward them, relief and adrenaline mixing in every step. We stood in a rough circle around the fire. Nobody spoke for a minute. Then Jonah made a joke to break the tension. Rafe laughed too loudly. I stayed quiet, eyes on the woods. We joked about staying, about not letting some weird moment end the night. But deep down, none of us believed it. We packed up in hush, put the fire out, left the food and the second bottle, and just walked. I'd just taken a seasonal position with the Forest Service, out in a pretty remote stretch of the Appalachian Mountains near the western edge of North Carolina. The job title was Trail Steward, which sounds kind of official, but really, it was mostly manual labor. I was supposed to keep the trails clean, repaint faded signs, measure distances between trailheads, and log anything that looked out of place. It sounded simple, peaceful even. And that was honestly the biggest reason I said yes. I needed to get away from everything. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want anyone looking at me like they were waiting for some explanation I didn't feel like giving. So, when they said the assignment would be mostly solo work with minimal contact, I told them I was in. They put me in this old cabin tucked about 2 miles off the Blue Ridge Parkway. No neighbors, no visible roads, just a narrow gravel track that cut through the trees and ended in front of the porch. The place looked like it had been sitting there untouched since at least the 50s. Wood was soft in spots. The stairs bowed when I stepped on them. The inside had this strange, sour smell, like a mix of wet ashes and something metallic, maybe rust. There was no electricity, no plumbing either. No phone line, obviously, and definitely no cell service. The only way to contact anyone was through a cranky old field radio that barely worked, unless the weather was clear and I was outside on the porch, facing west with the antenna propped up on the railing. Still, none of that fazed me. I liked the quiet. I brought my dog, Rella, with me. She's a big mix, mostly shepherd, with something else heavy-boned and serious in her. Not much of a barker, just solid, calm, alert. Honestly, she was probably the only thing that made me feel okay being out there by myself. That first week, it was like my brain finally stopped spinning. No people, no noise, just me, Rella, and the trees. The first strange thing happened on day 6. I was walking a switchback trail I'd just cleared the day before. Branches were still stacked off to the sides, and the dirt was freshly packed where I'd smoothed it out. Right in the middle of the path, there was this little stack of rocks. 5 flat stones, all balanced on top of each other like a mini tower, and sitting right on top was a slice of tree bark, laid out flat like someone had placed it carefully to finish the whole thing off. It didn't look natural. It was too symmetrical, too deliberate. But it didn't seem threatening either, just weird. I figured some hiker had built it for fun or to mark something. People leave little stacks like that all the time. So I nudged it with my boot, knocked it over, and moved on. Next day, I passed the same spot. The stack was back. Same number of rocks. Same shape. Bark on top again. Only this time, when I leaned down, I noticed something carved into the bark. At first, I thought it was just a scratch or some kind of weird knot in the wood. But when I looked closer, I realized it was a name. My name, Odessa. Scratched in rough, uneven letters, like someone had dug into the bark with a blade or maybe even a stick. The cuts were deep and sloppy, like whoever did it was in a hurry or didn't care how it looked. I stood there a long time, staring at it. Not scared exactly, just unsettled. I hadn't told anyone out here my full name, except for the ranger who did my intake. The cabin was off-grid, and I hadn't seen a single hiker since I arrived. So either someone had gone out of their way to mess with me, or I didn't finish that thought. I snapped a photo, radioed it in to the ranger station. Reed, the guy who usually answered, sounded annoyed, like I was wasting his time, said it was probably just some local kid trying to spook me. "Don't engage," he told me. "Just take pictures if it shows up again." So I pulled the pile apart again. This time I threw the bark into the woods, way out of sight. I left the trail early that day. That night, I was in the cabin, winding down. Rella was lying by the door. The lantern light was dim but warm. I'd almost forgotten about the rocks when I heard it. Just once. A scratch, not like claws, not like an animal. It was slow, dragging, like something hard was pulled across the wood of the door, from top to bottom. I froze, waited. Then I grabbed the flashlight and opened the door. Nothing was out there, just trees, darkness, my own breath clouding in the light. Next morning, I noticed something on the glass panel next to the door. 2 handprints, greasy, smeared, with the palms pressed flat and the fingers long. Too long, the spacing was off. They weren't adult-sized, not quite, but definitely not from a kid either. And the way they'd slid down left streaks, like someone had pressed in and dragged their hands as they lowered. I tried wiping them off, just made it worse. Left a cloudy film. By day 10, I was barely sleeping. I'd hear footsteps outside. Not scurrying, not rustling. Steps. Measured, intentional. 1 at a time. Step. Pause. Step again. Then silence. I stopped opening the door completely. Started keeping Rella inside all the time. She wouldn't settle anymore. Wouldn't lie down. She just paced. Head low, tail stiff, always alert. Sometimes she growled at the far corner of the cabin for no reason. Not bark, just this steady rumble, like she could hear something I couldn't. Then I found a rock stack on the porch. Next day there was one in the woodshed, right on top of my toolbox. Always the same formation, always 5 stones, always capped with bark. A few had my name scratched in, one had a date on it. It was a week ahead. I stopped going out entirely after that. Radioed the station again, no answer. Tried 3 more times. Finally, someone picked up, but it wasn't Reed. It wasn't anyone I'd spoken to before. A man's voice, low, flat. He didn't say his name, didn't ask who I was, just said, "You weren't supposed to move the stones." Then the static came back, and that was it. That night, Rella wouldn't go near the door. She stayed practically glued to me, growling low and steady. I kept every lantern on. The light helped for maybe 10 minutes, then it just made everything feel smaller, like the dark outside was pushing against the windows, waiting for me to blink. I didn't sleep, neither did she. On day 13, it showed up inside. Not on the porch, not in the woodshed, inside the cabin, on top of my cot. I had only stepped outside for water, maybe 5 minutes. When I came back in, there it was. Stack of 5 stones, bark, split in half. One side carved with O's, the other with S.A. That broke me. I grabbed Rella's leash, my keys, and my knife. That was it. No pack, no food, no gear. I didn't even lock the door, just stepped off the porch and cut straight down the ridge behind the cabin, crashing through undergrowth, ignoring the trail completely. We walked until night bled into morning. At some point, we hit the gravel access road, then the highway. I collapsed by the guardrail and sat there, arms around Rella, both of us shaking. Eventually, a car pulled over, then a patrol truck. I don't remember much of what I said, just that someone handed me a bottle of water and said, "You look like you've been out there a while." Later that day, they went back for my things. Everything was still there, my bag, my lanterns, my gear. Except the cot. The cot was gone, like completely gone. I was 6 months sober when I started working for Wren in Briar Hollow, Virginia. I was living in what used to be a storage room. The woman who ran the shop let me stay there as long as I kept the back alley clear and didn't make noise after hours. Other than her, the only person who knew I was alive was Wren. He ran this low-profile outfitter's shack on the edge of town. Sold propane, bug spray, campfire wood, and those overpriced freeze-dried meals to tourists heading into the Jefferson trails. It was one of those places that didn't even have a sign, just a crooked sticker in the window that said open when it wanted to be. He needed someone who wouldn't ask questions and didn't mind lifting heavy boxes or driving for hours to nowhere. I was someone who needed to stay moving, because standing still meant thinking, and thinking meant falling back into old holes. It worked. We didn't talk about our lives. He gave me jobs and paid in cash. We kept it simple. Late October, the air already biting, he came into the back room holding a folded piece of paper. Wren never really knocked, just stepped in like the building belonged to him, which maybe it did. "Gotta run up to Black Hollow Ridge," he said, like he was ordering coffee. "Cabin rental, big list. You'll have to carry it in yourself." I glanced at the paper. Dozens of items, all standard stuff. Canned beans, salt, lantern oil, kerosene in metal canisters. "Black Hollow?" I asked. "That even on the map?" He scratched at the side of his neck. "Nope. Gotta take the old fire road out past Miller's Bridge. Cut off at the broken sign. Trail runs 6 miles past the tree line. You'll know it when you're on it." "You sure someone's up there?" He didn't answer right away. Just tapped the top of the list again with a yellow fingernail. "They paid ahead. Left a note. Don't knock. Just leave the crates inside the main room." I looked out the window. Sun was already halfway down. "Why now? Can't we wait till morning?" Wren finally looked me in the eye. "Because I want you back before dark. That place. It's not good after sundown." He said it flat. Not as a warning, not even like it was strange, just a fact. I loaded the Jeep with the crates, strapped the kerosene tight so it wouldn't slosh around, packed a thermos of burnt coffee and 2 granola bars in my coat pocket. The drive out was slow, gravel popping under the tires, deer skittering into the brush. When I finally found the turnoff, marked only by a twisted metal stake and an old tire hanging from a tree, I pulled over and parked under a bent pine. The air felt wrong, heavy, like being inside a sealed room. I got the gear onto a frame pack and rigged a little rope sled behind me for the bulkier crates. Every step into those woods sounded too loud. There weren't any animal sounds, no wind through the branches, just the wet, sucking noise of my boots hitting mud and the quiet clatter of the sled behind me. After an hour or so, the trail curved sharply and dropped into a narrow ravine. When I climbed back out, the lodge was just there, sitting still at the far edge of a mossy clearing, like it had always been part of the hill. It looked ancient. The wood had turned gray and brittle. Every shutter was bolted tight. The porch sagged. The roof line drooped like a broken shoulder. But it was intact. Someone had kept it standing. I climbed the porch and knocked out of habit. No answer. Door opened on the first try. Inside, it was cold and smelled like a mix of dry mold, old paper, and something faintly acidic. The kind of smell you only notice after standing there too long. There were shelves stocked neatly, too neatly, with canned food, rolled up blankets, a rifle resting on a wall hook above the hearth. The bed was made, maps pinned to the wall, boots set beside the door like someone had just stepped out. But no dust, no mess. Nothing felt lived in. It was like a movie set waiting for the actors. I set the crates by the door and didn't linger. Closed the door, walked off that porch without looking back. I was halfway down the first ridge when I heard it. Older, just like that, calm, measured, like someone saying hello from across a dinner table. It came from behind me, maybe 20 or 30 feet. I stopped, listened, didn't hear it again. No birds, no movement, just that flat, watching silence. I turned slowly. Nothing, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing that explained it. I kept walking, a little faster, couldn't help it. My hands had gone cold and started to sweat inside my gloves. I kept scanning the trees, but everything just stared back in green and gray. Then, not far ahead, maybe a quarter mile from the Jeep, I saw them. 3 people, standing in the middle of the path like they were part of the woods, just standing there. For a second, I figured hunters, maybe a local crew, maybe some weird reenactment thing. But the clothes were wrong. They were wearing skin, patchy, tanned animal hides, stitched together into robes with twine or sinew. Some had fur, others just the leathery parts. All of them wore headpieces, deer skulls, real ones. Big racks of antlers, crooked and broken, covered in moss and what looked like dried something. I stopped. My body didn't even wait for my brain to catch up, just froze. I don't want any trouble, I said, slowly raising my hands. Just trying to get back to town. No answer. The one in the center raised a rifle. Long, old-looking, something from a war you only read about in books. I ran. Dropped the sled rope and just ran, lungs screaming, knees jolting with every root and rock. Behind me I heard something, like a hiss or a breath pushed through a cracked mouth. It didn't sound human. Then the gun fired. A crack like thunder, and a tree beside me burst apart. Splinters, bark, wood shards in my face. I didn't stop. My feet just moved on their own. I think I screamed, but I honestly don't remember hearing it. I crashed down the last slope and slammed into the Jeep so hard I left a dent in the hood. Fumbled for the keys. Engine clicked. Once, twice. Third time, it caught. I tore out of there without checking mirrors, tires spraying rocks behind me. I drove that fire road like the devil was in my back seat. When I got back to the shack, the sun was down and Ren's Jeep was gone. I knocked. Nothing. Window beside the door was cracked open, and through it, I saw broken glass scattered across the floor, like something had been thrown or someone had fought to get out. I waited an hour in the car, lights off, no one came. Next morning, I went to the sheriff's office, told the deputy everything. I expected laughter, maybe a warning about drinking, but when I mentioned the deer skulls, his eyes locked onto mine, and he just shook his head. "Don't go back that way," he said. That was it. 3 days later, they found Ren, wedged between two massive rocks in a hollow about 10 miles from where I saw those people. His jaw was broken in 3 places. His throat was torn out, like something had tried to dig inside, but there wasn't a drop of blood anywhere around him. No prints, no drag marks. Just Ren, sitting upright, like someone had placed him there and walked off. I packed up the same night, got a job loading freight up in Baltimore. Cold, hard work, no woods. No one knows my name there, and that's how I want it. That summer, I was working as a wilderness field instructor for a behavioral therapy program based out of a tiny, tucked-away base camp near Carrion Ridge in western North Carolina. The job itself seemed simple enough. Lead small groups of teenage girls on 12-day backcountry trips through the Appalachia Mountains, keep them physically safe, offer a little emotional support, and make sure no one wandered off or snapped. I'd done similar work before, mostly out west in Utah and Arizona. The terrain there was harsher, red rock, sun-scorched ridges, real rattlesnakes, but it always felt honest. If something out there wanted you dead, it didn't hide it. The East was different. The Appalachian woods were quiet in a way that made your ears ring, too dense, too soft underfoot, like the forest had been absorbing things for too long and wasn't finished yet. My group that session had 6 girls, ages ranging from 14 to 17. They came from different states, different situations. One had a court-ordered placement. Another was sent by a high-end therapist with a business card that probably smelled like essential oils. The rest were the usual mix, concerned parents trying to course correct before things went off the rails. Some girls bonded over shared bad luck. A couple stayed quiet, heads down, eyes tracking the woods. None of them had ever been backpacking before. They didn't know how to hang food bags, filter water, or even lace boots right. That was my job. The first week went about as well as I could have hoped. No serious injuries, no major blowouts. We hiked, we cooked, we had long silences by rivers, where some of them started to open up just a little. The heat was the hardest part. July in that part of the state meant everything stuck to your skin. The air felt thick enough to chew. Even standing still, you'd find sweat running down the backs of your knees. By day 8, we'd hit a rhythm. We'd had one twisted ankle on a route crossing, and a panic attack when a girl thought she saw a snake that turned out to be a stick, but otherwise things had gone smooth. I'd earned their trust. Not all the way, but enough. They'd started asking questions, even joking sometimes. They made fun of how many peanut butter tortillas I could eat in a day. One of them, Samara, had started calling me, which was accurate. I'd gotten real good at catching 10-minute naps on rocks. That night, we set up camp in a hollow, maybe half a mile off a narrow ridge trail. Not a marked site. Most of our stops weren't. We were allowed to use unofficial clearings with verbal okays from forestry contacts. Part of the program's philosophy was isolation. No roads, no signs, fewer temptations to bolt. This particular site was down in a wide, shallow dip with a dry creek bed running through it. The terrain was thick, all rhododendron and mossy roots. I checked in with our base team around 3:00 p.m., logging our GPS, reporting weather, noting ground conditions. No concerns. Dinner was freeze-dried chili and crushed granola bars. One of the girls was stringing up the bear bag rope, while 2 others were in a heated debate about whether the stars were even real or just projections from government satellites. I sat back near my bivy sack, stretching out sore calves, feeling this rare sense of calm I didn't get often in those jobs. Everything was going smoothly, which always made me a little nervous. When teens get quiet and content in the woods, they're either growing or hiding something. The breeze came up around sundown enough to make the tarp flap and rattle a little. That sound always reminded me of breathing. By 10, everyone was zipped in, 2 tents, 3 girls each, near the southern edge of the camp. I was maybe 20 feet away in a low-hanging tarp shelter with my bivy sack beneath it. You can get used to anything with enough exhaustion. I'd gotten to the point where I could sleep on tree roots like they were memory foam. I heard soft giggles, then whispers, then silence. I didn't dream, I just woke up. Not a sound, not a nightmare, just eyes open, instantly aware. The kind of alertness your brain saves for when something's wrong before you even know what. Then I heard it. Crunch. A single step. Slow. Measured. Leaves under boots. Then another step. Same rhythm. Same weight. I froze. Didn't even breathe. I'd been in the woods long enough to recognize different sounds. This wasn't a deer. Not a bear. And not some raccoon nosing around for granola. These were heavy, human steps. Not rushing, not sneaking, just moving with intent. Then I heard a second set, lighter, shorter stride. Still boots. They moved around the tents. I could hear them tracking the perimeter. They didn't talk at first, just slow steps through the leaves, occasionally brushing branches or nudging something soft. I stayed flat, didn't move a muscle. My bivy sack was off to the side, under shadow. They probably couldn't see me unless they were really looking. Then one of them spoke, a man's voice, not whispering, not yelling, just talking like he was reading a shopping list aloud. "We'll wait till they move." Another voice, closer. Not as deep, sounded younger, nervous maybe. They always do. The air felt thick, not hot, just dense, like everything was being muffled. No insects, no night birds. Even the trees seemed to be holding their breath. I slid my hand slowly down inside the sleeping bag and found the flashlight. Didn't turn it on, just gripped it tight and waited. The steps stopped, and then silence. I don't know how long I lay there. 10 minutes, half an hour. The longer it stretched, the more unbearable it felt. I finally rolled inch by inch until I could slip out from under the tarp. I crawled, elbows and knees only, toward the girls' tents. At the closest one, I leaned right up to the fabric and said quietly, "Stay zipped in. Don't make a sound. Don't move." I heard a little gasp inside, then silence. They were awake. They knew. I backed off and hunkered under a nearby maple. From that angle, I could see the bear bag rope overhead, strung high between two sturdy limbs. I scaled the nearest tree slowly, keeping close to the trunk. About 10 feet up, I stopped, bracing on a thick branch. I pulled the satellite phone from my jacket pocket. "Weak signal, 1 bar, enough." I punched in the code we used for threats we couldn't talk about out loud. 6 numbers, no names, just human presence. Unknown. Field threat. Awaiting directive. No response. The screen just blinked. Then movement. 3 figures at the far edge of the clearing. 20 yards out. Half in shadow. One of them held something long. A staff? A stick? Could have been anything. Another one was holding a lantern, but not an electric one. It flickered. Dim orange light, swaying slightly. Flame. I couldn't see their faces, just outlines, just enough to know they weren't walking away. They stood there, watching, and they didn't move. Not once. I lost feeling in my legs. My arms ached from holding on. Every few minutes, I'd tap the sat phone's refresh button. Just before first light, it buzzed. A single message. Move to evac point. Vehicle inbound. 6:30 arrival. When I looked back up, the clearing was empty. I didn't wait. I climbed down, crawled back to the tents, and told the girls we were leaving. Nobody asked why. I think they already knew, or at least knew enough not to want the rest. We packed in silence. No breakfast, no small talk. I set the pace and they followed. 7 miles to the fire road. We made it in under 3 hours. Blisters, soaked boots, and not one complaint. When the van rolled up, the driver looked at me, then at the girls, then just opened the door. No one said a word. Back at base, I filed the incident report. Everything. The steps, the voices, the shapes, the lantern. I expected at least a follow-up, some kind of reaction. They thanked me for the report, said they'd notify forestry services. A week later, I got a 1-ring update. No confirmed trespassers. Possible animal movement. Case closed. I was 27 when it happened. The cabin belonged to the cousin's husband, whatever that means in extended family speak. All I remember is they needed someone to keep watch for a long weekend near Radford, just in case things got weird. Weird, not dangerous, which felt like a downgrade if you ask me. They offered $400 and a fridge full of food. I'd been crashing on a buddy's couch in Roanoke, so I didn't care if I had to sleep in the woods. I took it. The drive out was awful. The GPS dropped signal, so I followed a gravel track that turned to dirt and mud. Dented my car several times, past a broken water tower with paint barely legible, and a rusted gate that looked like it hadn't been opened since the Clinton administration. The cabin showed up around noon Friday. It sat slumped into the hill, unpainted gray wood, beams bowed, porch sagging like it was tired. 4 deer skulls nailed up in the corners, each one a silent little warning. A blackened horseshoe above the door. Burnt, maybe? I didn't stick around to find out. Inside was too still. No dust, no smell. Just an eerie silence that felt like a dare. Chairs lined up so turned down perfection. Rugs didn't shift underfoot. They felt nailed down. No signs of life, no magazines, no mail, no dog bowl, just sterile cabin showroom vibes. One photo in the hallway caught my eye. A kid and a man, arms around each other like old pals. But their faces were warped, like hot wax had dripped across them. That night, I slept with one eye open. Every stick pop or breeze rustle made me freeze. Around 11:30, I heard it. A long scraping sound under the floor. Slow, steady, deliberate. Like claws, maybe, pulling something heavy. It moved underneath me, prowling a route I couldn't track. I grabbed my phone, flashlight on, and snuck from room to room. The sound receded as I moved. By the time I reached the pantry in the back, it stopped dead. No echo, no whimper, nothing. Saturday morning, I was cooking eggs when I noticed them. 3 kids standing at the tree line across the clearing. No wave, no smile, just quiet, still shapes in the woods. They hadn't told me who'd be there, when they'd arrive, or why. Suddenly, they were just there. I walked out, trying to be casual, Sunday morning backyard chat style. 3 pale kids. The oldest, Noah, 10 years old, haircut crooked and uneven. He wouldn't look at me, just stared into the trees behind me, like expecting something to slither out. Ellie, 8, arms crossed, too adult posture, too silent. Mason, 6, head down, staring at the dirt, almost didn't notice me. All 3 chicken ghost pale like the sun meant nothing to them. Noah said they visited sometimes, told me the man who lived there still moved around. I asked what he meant. He whispered, "You'll see. Just don't light the back lantern." I frowned. "Why?" Ellie chimed in, bored but intense. "The wind gets lost, then it finds things it shouldn't." I turned to Mason, but he just blinked and barely breathed, then grunted, "Don't open the hole." They didn't wait for me to digest that. They just packed up and left, like they'd delivered some ambient warning. I didn't stop them. That night, I set up in the guest room, hoping for a calmer space. Instead, I got a front row seat to the scrape show, louder this time, echoing beneath the bed, rattling the walls. I followed the noise, barefoot and trembling, along a dim hallway to the attic hatch. I'd mentioned earlier it was sealed shut with rusty latches. Now, one latch dangled open. The damn thing invited me more than scared me. I didn't go up. Instead, I surrendered, dragged the mattress into the hallway, and stayed pinned to the wall all night. By Sunday morning, the silence felt breathable, like the walls had thinned. Dawn came, and Mason shrieked. I found him under the mudroom bench, pressing a hand to his foot. Something had flipped his cot. The mattress was shoved against the wall. The trapdoor to the crawl space stood open, as if expecting someone. The smell hit like a warning, a rotten, earthen musk, like a relocated grave. The moment I flipped the mattress, I saw scratches gouged into the floorboards. Deep, heavy scores, not animal, not kid. The furthest led right to a cracked baseboard. My light pierced into the break, a twitch. Skinny fingers, nails snagged and hanging, retracted into the grime-black hole. I froze. Then I pulled back and tossed the cot over the opening. No conversation, no questions asked. I tried calling someone. My phone, no bars. The landline dead. Even the router lights were dull. I stared at a clock that clearly didn't work. I gathered the kids in the big room, rolled their sleeping bags into a haphazard circle, cutesy camping trip, except no one smiled. Ellie started tracing patterns in the ash with a twig. Noah stared at me, unblinking. Mason just watched the embers, all tight muscles and wide eyes. At some point, past midnight, the house spoke again. Footsteps above us, dragging, slow. Then stairs, 2 steps, silence. I checked the doors, still locked, but no key. They felt fused like cooled wax around the frames. They wouldn't budge. Another knock, hard, deep and resonant, but not on a door, on the physical wall of the house. A jab at my ribs. Then I caught sight of the basement door. It swung open, gently, as if invited. I walked toward it with slow purpose, peering over the railing. My light didn't reach the bottom. Then, movement. Something slithered back up the stairs as fast as it could, 5th step from the bottom. But I slammed the door shut and shoved a chair under the knob before I even realized it. Then the lights gone. Total draping darkness. I didn't breathe much. My chest hurt from holding in fear. Then it started again. A wet scrape down the kitchen tile like nails over concrete. Step, step, drag, then heavy breath. Up the steps again. No hesitation, slow, painstaking. I grabbed the kids. We bolted to the smallest bedroom, threw the door shut. The knob turned once, then again. Wet, shallow breathing pressed against the wood. Then 3 knocks, in rhythm, hard, deliberate. We didn't say a word. Silence stretched wider. Then under us, the crawlspace. Something scratching, pressing, upward in climbs. I knew what I'd see, but curiosity stupidly pulled me. I knelt, lifted the bed skirt. Right there, face to face, his skin looked pale enough to glow. Cavernous pockmarks. Eyes that hadn't seen daylight but stared directly through me. No expression, but still, a smile, a slow, knowing curl of lips. Then, he yanked backward, like gravity had betrayed him, and something unseen pulled him away. I shoved the dresser in place and took 3 steps back, heart slamming. Ellie whispered, trembling, "You looked. He knows you now." I nodded, but didn't speak. We stayed stuffed in that room, silent except for our breaths, until the first light inched across the curtains. When the door opened Sunday morning, I half expected it to be part of the nightmare. Instead, it was the parents, bright like it was any old summer weekend. Thanked me, handed me an envelope. I put it on the porch. No goodbyes. I got home, slept for a day, then a friend called. They'd found a man, bone-thin, filthy, crusted in wall dust, no resistance, no mumbled confession, just smiled. Police said his name was Ben. He lived inside the house, like it was his home. Had been, for years. I deleted everything, changed my number, moved counties.